BBC app. And stay up to date with live updates on bbc.com/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.
Hello, I'm Christian Fraser, and this is The Context.
51 people had been rescued from the waves because they'd responded so quickly. But he did say that amongst the 12 were a pregnant woman and also a number of children.
C'est-à-dire que quand on sait...
It is very dangerous, but that's all they have left. They hand their lives over to whoever, but that's all they have left. They feel a responsibility to provide a future for their families.
Un traité migratoire entre
we need a treaty, a migration treaty between the UK and the European Union.
Another tragedy in the Channel, at least 12 migrants dead in the worst loss of life since 2021. The Labour government says the European governments have a mutual interest in disrupting the criminal gangs that send these boats. We'll get the view tonight from Germany. Shameful is how Benjamin Netanyahu describes the UK government's decision to cancel some arms exports. But what is he doing to rein in the settler violence in the occupied West Bank? We'll have a special report tonight on the expanding number of illegal settlements. And could mobile phone companies do more to stem the sudden rise in snatch thefts on our streets? Good evening. The French Interior Minister says at least 12 people have died and 2 are still missing after a boat carrying migrants capsized in the English Channel. 10 of them were female, 6 of them said to be young girls. There's been a large search and rescue operation underway since this morning. A spokesperson for the French Coast Guard says 50 people have been saved. All of them were in the water when they were rescued and are now being treated at French hospitals, several of them in critical condition. Earlier there in the city of Poltava, where that search and rescue continues. Around the world and across the UK, you're watching BBC News.
I owe everything to my grandma and her cooking. Our food is traditional and innovative. My business grew quickly, and I really want to keep putting my passion for food first. So we digitalized with Alipay Plus D-Store to manage payments and operations efficiently. My dashboard shows me how the store is operating. One day, people will know this dish is from the Hainan story. It's about a promise to my grandmother that will carry on her legacy with pride.
I am going to lecture you on climate change.
Have you considered resigning over this? Because you're clearly embarrassed.
Of course, I have been. I have thought about this.
I want to be totally honest with you, and I am being honest with you.
At least this should be a common ground for everyone. We should defend international law.
In the spirit of your title of Hard Talk, you're completely wrong.
I'm not offended, but I want to hear why.
You're completely wrong.
Hard Talk on BBC News.
Welcome back. The British government is defending its decision to ban some arms sales to Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu called the decision shameful today and accused the government of emboldening Hamas. The Defence Secretary, John Healey, says the UK remains a staunch ally of Israel but must follow the law. Around 30 licences out of 350 have been withdrawn because ministers say there is a clear risk the weapons could be used to violate international humanitarian law. Here's our political editor, Chris Mason. Dr. Hareen De Silva, it's great work that you're doing. Thank you for coming on and do stay safe.
Thank you. Bye.
Dr. Hareen De Silva, who's working there in Gaza on the WHO's inoculation programme. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
Hello, it does remain unseasonably hot. Been a very mixed affair weather-wise across Europe. We've seen some spells of half.
Serving local ingredients and those adapting traditions for modern tastes.
We can help you make up yours.
Potato people.
Yeah. Check on BBC Weather.
Its own unique story, bringing a fresh perspective on our changing world. Join me, Nick Quick, for discovering the world's table. Watch on Anchor.
Hello, I'm Christian Fraser. You're watching The Context on BBC News. Banned under both Israeli and international law, but rapidly expanding during the war in Gaza. We'll bring you a special report on the illegal settler outposts appearing in the West Bank. But before we do that, let's get a check on the sport. Here's Chetan. Hello, Chetan.
Hi Christian, thank you. We're going to start with some breaking news in the last hour. Leicester City have won an appeal against a decision that could have led to a points deduction for an alleged breach of Premier League profit and sustainability rules. We'll have more for you later. That, Christian, is all your sport for now.
Chetan, thank you very much. We are going to continue our conversation about the challenges in the Middle East and focus for a second on the West Bank. Even before the outbreak of the war, there were as many as 700,000 settlers living in the occupied territory. And since then, radical Israeli settlers have seized on the opportunity to take more land from those Palestinians that live there, forcing many of them from their homes. Instead of traditional urban settlements, they are establishing now what are called herding outposts with the intention of controlling large tracts of land. While that is illegal in international law, BBC Investigations has found evidence that they are supported by an Israeli government-funded organisation. Amir Nada reports. Around the world and across the UK, you're watching BBC News.
Find your story. Bulgaria, a discovery to share. The future is already here.
All about AI changing our jobs. From gadgets to gaming.
May the best driver win. It will be. Sustainability to AI.
Giant nets and AI robots to deal with plastic pollution.
The latest developments from the world of tech. A floating solar farm, and it's a pretty impressive sight.
Wow! That went right through me!
Click on BBC News.
The 87-year-old Pope Francis has arrived in Indonesia for the start of a historic and ambitious trip to Asia. These are the pictures of the pontiff being greeted at the international airport in the capital. Indonesia is the world's most populous Muslim majority country. A lot of focus on this trip on interfaith dialogue, and the Pope is due to visit a mosque and a neighbouring church during his 3 days there. Our correspondent Jonathan Head has more on the Indonesian leg of the tour. Extraordinary story and a great tribute to him. Now, Queen Camilla says King Charles is doing very well with his cancer treatment. She made those comments during a visit to an NHS trust in Bath today, which specialises in cancer treatment. The King is being treated for an undisclosed form of cancer and has been receiving care as an outpatient since early February. The Queen was asked by a charity support worker about her husband's health and gave the short answer, yes, he's doing very well. So that is good to hear. We're going to take a short break. The other side of that break, we will have our panel with us. Plenty to discuss tonight, so I do hope you'll stay with us for that. We'll be right back.
Hello, today has been a very mixed affair weather-wise across some of the big weather stories unfolding around the world right now.
But just because I'm a disabled person doesn't mean that I should only ever cover stories to do with disability. And that's a very fine line to tread, but hopefully I'm getting it right.
Hello, I'm Christian Fraser. You're watching The Context on BBC News.
Our determination to stand with Israel, to be part of the collective defence if they come under direct attack again, as they have done before, remains resolute and absolute.
To my mind, there's ample evidence that not only weapons have been used at risk of violating IHL, but they have indeed violated IHL.
So will you let Palestinian families return to this area?
Joining me tonight on the panel, the former leader of Scottish Labour, Kezia Dugdale, and Wills Robinson, Associate Editor of the Daily Mail US. Looking forward to talking to our panel very shortly. First, though, let me bring you the latest BBC News. The French Interior Minister says at least 12 people have died and 2 are still missing after a boat carrying migrants capsized in the English Channel. 10 of them were female, 6 of them are said to be young girls. There's been a large search and rescue operation underway since this morning. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says 51 people have been killed and more than 200 injured by a Russian missile strike in the city of Poltava. He said 2 ballistic missiles partially destroyed a building belonging to the Institute of Communications. It is one of the deadliest single strikes of the war to date. 5 children have been arrested on suspicion of murder following the death of an 80-year-old man who was attacked in a park. Bim Kohli died in hospital after being assaulted while walking his dog at Franklin Park in Leicestershire on Sunday evening. You're very welcome to the programme. Shameful is how Benjamin Netanyahu described today the British government's decision to suspend 30 of its 350 arms licences to Israel. On social media, the Israeli Prime Minister said the decision would only embolden Hamas. He vowed to continue the war with or without British arms. The UK's chief rabbi, Sir Ephraim Mervis, says the decision beggars belief. The former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, asked on X whether Labour wanted Hamas to win. And yet, the review was started by the last Conservative government. The Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, said the report found there was a clear risk that UK arms may be used in violation of international humanitarian law. OK, we'll leave it there. We'll focus on where this might add up to in the election campaign which is ongoing. We'll talk about the campaign that's been underway during the Labour Day weekend. That's all to come around the world and across the UK. You're watching BBC News. Welcome back. 63 days to go. That's 9 weeks to Election Day in America. And as is always the case after Labour Day, the sprint is on. A week today will come the first presidential debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Absentee ballots will be mailed out in North Carolina on Friday. Yes, Friday. Early voting starts in Pennsylvania in 2 weeks' time. And today, the Vice President is out with a new ad on the economy. OK, after the break, we are going to turn to matters here. We're going to talk about austerity, whether there is any. Spending cuts announced today in Scotland. A lot of passing the buck, both in Glasgow, in Edinburgh, and also here in London. So we'll get Kezia's thoughts on that. And also how we view history. You might have some thoughts on that, whether our views on Britishness have changed. All that's coming up after the break. Stay with us.
Hello, it does remain unseasonably hot. It has been a very mixed affair weather-wise across the UK.
From 9 amazing space missions to the times Nessie made a splash. The list charts some of the most remarkable events that have made the headlines. Each episode dives into a new story, from the recent past right up to today, and discover there's a lot more behind the biggest and strangest stories. The List. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
Hello, I'm Christian Fraser. You're watching The Context on BBC News. Are you proud of your British history? Or have your views changed? Are you now more reflective about the UK place in the modern world? If you are, you're not alone. Welcome back. The Scottish Government confirmed today it is cutting government spending by £500 million. The Finance Secretary, Shona Robinson, said the savings were necessary to support the Scottish Government's next budget. The SNP has blamed prolonged Westminster austerity, Brexit, a global pandemic, the war in Ukraine and the cost of living crisis, which Ms Robinson said had placed enormous and growing pressure on the public finances. I endorse that message, although I am biased, I should say that. And many of you won't agree. I know that too, so don't tweet me. Listen, we'll go to a break. After the break, it's time for the panel. Stay with us.
මේ තියන්නේ මම චිත්‍ර 11ක් එකපාර ඇඳලා ඒක වයිරල් වෙච්ච වීඩියෝ එකේ චිත්‍ර ටික ගොඩක් වෙලාවට ඉතින් අපිට සල්ලි දෙන්නේ නැහැ. එයා චිත්‍ර ඇඳලා විකුණලා එයාගේ අධ්‍යාපන මෙව කරගන්නවා. වැරදි සමාජයට යන්නේ නැතුව අනිත් දරුවන්ට කියන්නේ නිර්මාණ කරලා ඉදිරියට ඇවිත් මේ වගේ හොඳ ළමෙක් වගේ ඉන්න කියලා.
Original global stories from the BBC.
Welcome back. Just a quick line of breaking news to bring you before we go to time for the panel. You will recall that the special counsel in Washington, Jack Smith, revised his indictment against Donald Trump in relation to the January 6 charges. That was after, of course, the decision from the Supreme Court to grant greater immunity to sitting presidents. Donald Trump has said in a court filing on Tuesday that he will plead not guilty to criminal charges in that revised indictment, which accuses him of attempting to overturn the 2020 election defeat. So he's going to plead not guilty to the revised charges that the special counsel has put forward. Now it is time for the panel. Kezia, I'll start with you. I've been following this story of the childminder who has been charged with incitement after during the run-up to the riots. Interesting to a lot of people because she's the wife of a Tory councillor, I think in Northamptonshire, if I'm not wrong. Anyway, you want to talk about the tweet she sent and whether it breached X's rules?
Oh, indeed. We saw how much of a huge security failure and a breach the assassination attempt was. And now the Secret Service are playing catch-up. So they need to bring in these sort of, no matter how small, these precautions to make sure that their protectees are safe in any matter.
Wills, good to have your company on the programme tonight. Kezia, a pleasure as always. Thank you both for your company. We will, of course, be back same time tomorrow. Do join us for that. Have a very good evening. Good night.
Hi there, good evening. I'm Chetan Partik with your latest sports news. We start with Leicester City, who've won their appeal against a decision that could have led to a points deduction for an alleged breach of Premier League profit and sustainability rules. And much more on all those sports stories over on the BBC Sport website. But from me and the team, that's all for now. Good night.
Hello, today has been a very mixed affair weather-wise across the
dramatic campaign. The contest is close. We'll have all the twists and turns live on the ground reporting and expert analysis. So do join me, Katrina Perry, here on BBC News.
There when the story breaks. BBC News. Follow on the app.
At 10, a pregnant woman and 6 children are among the dead.
I'm Katrina Perry in
after
Washington, and this is BBC World News America.
In all, 12
More than 50 people are killed by a Russian missile strike on a Ukrainian military training center in Poltava.
French officials
protests erupt in Tel Aviv as pressure grows on Israel's prime minister to secure the release of hostages in Gaza. At least 12 people have died after a boat carrying migrants capsized in the English Channel. Around 50 others were rescued.
It was a propaganda. I'm just sick. I feel quite sick about the whole thing.
We've spoken to a Palestinian woman who says you put a gun to her head.
We tracked down a notorious extremist
Hello and
Jewish
welcome to World
settler
News
in the West
America.
Bank,
I'm Katrina
accused
Perry.
of threatening
Russia carried out
Palestinians.
its single deadliest attack
On the
on
eve of the
Ukraine this year,
publication of the
killing at least
dreadful
51
inquiry's
people
final
and
report,
injuring
we talked to some of
271
those
others.
whose lives
Moscow launched
have
the
been changed
missile
forever.
strike on a military communications institute and a nearby hospital in the central
And there's
city
more
of
gold for
Poltava.
Great Britain at the
Ukraine's armed
Paralympics
forces
with Faye
confirmed
Rogers
soldiers at the
winning
military
in the pool.
institute were among the dead. Emergency
And
workers
stay
are
with us
still
here
working
on
to
BBC
rescue
News
survivors
for
from the
continuing
rubble.
coverage
The regional
and
governor
analysis
of
from
Poltava
our team
says
of
15
correspondents
people are
in the
still
UK
believed to be trapped.
and around the world.
President Volodymyr Zelensky said those responsible for the attack would be held accountable and renewed his calls to allies for more air defences. The White House condemned the attack and said military assistance would be arriving to Ukraine in the coming weeks.
Good evening to you. It is the biggest single loss of life so far in the Channel this year, with a pregnant woman along with 6 children among the dead when their small boat capsized off the French coast. 12 people died in all and 51 others were rescued. Some are in a critical condition.
The missiles hit.